Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the fantastic pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm really good, Brian. I hear there's some important stuff going on in horse racing that we should talk about in the show this week.
I think so, Matt. I think we're 2 legs through with one more to go. America's Triple Crown. We're talking about the Triple Crown again. Bob Baffert winning the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness, Matt. What is this, number 4, number 5? How many times has he done it now? I'm losing track.
I think this is the 5th time that he'll be going for the Triple Crown, right? He missed 3 times, and then American Pharoah, and here we are with Justify. Baffert.
Simply amazing. Mr. Baffert wins his 7th Preakness, 5 for 5 with Derby winners in the Preakness, and 14 wins overall in the Triple Crown Series, Matt. That's a training feat that may not be matched again soon. He's now tied for the all-time lead, and he's now tied for the all-time lead with Preakness wins, of course. The player he's tied with hasn't won the Preakness in about 130 years. So Mr. Baffert is the king of Baltimore. Let's go back to the Preakness, Matt. Interesting race. I wasn't sure what we were going to see on this sloppy track. We didn't see everything we wanted to see because of the fog, but we ended up with a heck of a good race.
We sure did. It was the first time that Justify really felt the challenge, and he was challenged every step of the way around the Pimlico racetrack.
Good Magic is the 2-year-old champion. Obviously, he ran a good race in the Bluegrass, very good race in the Derby to be second. I don't think it sure doesn't sound like it was Chad Brown's intention to be on the lead. But when Mr. Ortiz, Jose Ortiz got the break and found a pace that wasn't all that fast, he let his horse run. Justify went after him, and the table was set for a battle, a battle that lasted more than a mile, Matt, before Justify finally started to inch away from Good Magic, turning for home.
Yeah, and I don't think it's really fair to be blaming the ride of Jose Ortiz. He made a decision there. Like you said, they came out of the gate. The fractions were not fast. No one was going to challenge Justify. And you and I think all the racing fans know that if Justify had gone on challenged and opened up a length or 2 on the rest of the field, it would have been all over, because he gets out there, he gets to relax, set the pace, and nobody has a chance. And we've talked about this on the show at various points for various big races. It isn't necessarily the numbers and the fractions that are happening in the race, but when Good Magic went head to head with Justify for, like you said, virtually a mile in the race, that's taxing for any kind of horse, even a horse like Justify. They don't get a chance to relax.
Good point, Matt. It's not just the fractions, for sure. In fact, I would say that if he runs a little faster, but he's all alone, it's less taxing than what happened in this Preakness. Good Magic, very good horse. By the way, and I don't subscribe to the theory that Ortiz did a poor job in riding Good Magic in the Preakness. I think what we would have seen was a similar finish to the Derby. I think you're right. I think Good Magic probably would have made a move at him if he had laid off the pace, and probably would have been second instead of fourth. As is, he was beaten 1 length. But what happened is both horses were eventually softened up a little bit, and that allowed for some long shots to run big races. Certainly they did run big races, but to get in the picture at the end, Bravazzo, Tenfold were between the two. That means 4 horses within a length at the finish, Matt. That means that this was Justified by far his toughest race as far as margin of victory. That also questions the overall quality of the Preakness. That also questions what kind of speed figures he's going to get. And as it turns out, this was his lowest speed figure yet. but I thought it was still an impressive race.
Without question, Brian, because as you were saying, this is the most challenged that he was in any race in his career, and he took care of the horse that was going head to head with him, put him away, and then had enough to hold off the closers who had a perfect setup in the race.
Right. And if you ask me, Matt, after this Preakness, after his fourth place finish, I'm going to say Good Magic is still where I had him before the Preakness, and that's the second best 3-year-old in the country.
Yeah, I agree with that, Brian, and I voted that way in the recent NTRA poll.
Interesting. Now, having said that, Matt, Justify ran better than I think maybe some people gave him credit for. Only half a length win. The time wasn't slow. In fact, the time all the way around wasn't slow. It was kind of a moderately run race all the way around on this sloppy track at Pimlico. Track wasn't plain slow at Pimlico either. So, it wasn't a real slow track. It wasn't 155 and change is certainly not the fastest Preakness ever, but it's not the slowest by any means. Does what we saw set him up for the Belmont? That's the real question now. People want to know, is he going to win the Triple Crown? And from what you saw in the race, in the Preakness, and in the final furlong or 16th of a mile, is this a horse you think is going to win the Belmont?
Well, and I think what we saw in the Preakness alone is not the only factor that needs to be taken into consideration. I think you need to also take into consideration the fact that Justify's short career, and by the time he gets in the gate and runs the Belmont Stakes, that will be 6 races. Those 6 races will have taken place in less than 4 months. And I think that certainly is a factor that needs to be considered.
Yeah, you're right. And I think the most important race going forward is the Preakness, and that's the most recent race. So we learned some things, and let's give credit again to Justify for what he's done already. 5 races within 3 months. He started his career in February in a maiden sprint, and now he's a Derby and Preakness winner, undefeated in 5 starts. Let's give credit to Bravazzo. Throw out that Louisiana Derby. Matt Bravazzo's a nice horse who came running tenfold, only his 4th lifetime race, just like Justify in the Kentucky Derby. Certainly ran a very good race. Wasn't closing quite as fast as Bravazzo at the end, but tenfold, like we talked about a little bit, could very well be the real deal. And again, Good Magic beating 1 length after taking the race to the Derby winner, the whole Preakness. So overall, an exciting Preakness, but now we look forward to the Belmont.
Yeah, we sure do, right? The top four very good horses, trained by 4 of the top trainers in the country, with Baffert and Lucas and Asmussen and Chad Brown.
And Matt, it's on to New York. It's on to Belmont, June 9, the Belmont Stakes, the test of the champion, 1.5 miles once around that big, giant sandy oval at Belmont Park. Justify, I don't think Justify scared anybody off from the Belmont, but we do have some questions as far as who will line up against Justify. And part of those questions come from the factor of common ownership.
Yeah, Brian, it kind of seems like Todd Pletcher is stuck in the middle here again with the WinStar ownership, kind of like he was a couple years ago when WinStar won the Belmont Stakes with Creator. But going to this year, he of course has Audible, who finished a very good 3rd place, just out of 2nd place in the Kentucky Derby. And as Todd is wont to do, he skipped the Preakness with Audible, looking ahead for other things. But now here we have Justify, who is on his way with a Triple Crown shot, same ownership, WinStar. And the question is, do they run Audible in the Belmont Stakes? could be the main competition. They don't want their own horse to beat Justify out of a Triple Crown, do they, Brian?
Right, and it's not just Windstar. It's down the line with these two horses. You see China Racing Club, and you see Starlight, and you see Head of Plains. So Audible is a horse that I think would probably line up as the second choice now in the Belmont if you were to line up. But with this ownership conundrum of all these owners owning both horses, it's very interesting to see what they do. I think there's a good chance that Audible doesn't run in the Belmont, Matt, and I think that would be a shame. He's a New York bred. He rallied nicely in the Derby to just miss second place. He wouldn't probably be my top pick at 12 furlongs at Belmont, but he certainly deserves a shot. On the other hand, if I own Justify, I don't know if I'd want Audible in the race either.
Yeah, Brian, and I think it would be a shame if he's not in there. But if you want to continue trying to think the way that ownership group would, you probably also have to throw in there that after the Belmont Stakes, whether Justify is successful or he isn't successful, you have to figure at this point he's going to get a little bit of a break. And he's going to get a rest for a while and then maybe gear up for a run at the Breeders' Cup Classic, which would mean that there are a lot of big races coming in July and August for 3-year-olds that would be without Justify, that would be there for Audible, right, Brian? Races like the Jim Dandy and the Haskell and the Travers. So I could hear that explanation, and I guess it's a fair one, coming from the Justify camp.
Right. And Audible, Matt, say what you will about pedigree these days. Maybe it means less than it once did, but Audible doesn't seem like he's bred for 12 furlongs. But then again, he ran a big Derby. That was in the slot. Who knows what happens in a fast track in a mile and a half. We'll watch this story unfold over the next 2.5 weeks. But I think there's a good chance that Audible will be held out of the Belmont, still leaving a lot of interesting options, Matt. One of the interesting options, though, is My Boy Jack, and it's a far different situation than Audible, Matt, but Saul Cumin, Monomoy stable, who's part owner of My Boy Jack, is, of course, also Head of Plains ownership, so there is some conflict there as well, although it's a different kind of percentage where My Boy Jack is not the same true ownership as Justify.
Yeah, I think that is a completely kind of different situation, and I would be more confident that we would see My Boy Jack in the Belmont Stakes.
Yeah, and My Boy Jack might make even more sense in the Belmont than Audible, although Audible obviously is a very good horse. Some horses that we do think will challenge Justify in the Belmont, folks. First off, the horses that were rallying fast at the end of the Preakness, Bravazzo and Tenfold, both look to come back, and off that Preakness, they certainly deserve a shot. But maybe some even more interesting horses. We've talked about Blended Citizen off his Peter Pan win. Free Drop Billy again is a possibility. Matt Gronkowski now in the Chad Brown barn from Europe. Maybe Machismo. Maybe Restoring Hope, another Baffert, maybe Solomini, another Baffert. So there are questions there as well. But the two I'm really wanting to see in the Belmont, the two, Matt, that I think might be 12 furlong horses, I'm going to throw out the names of Vino Rosso and Hofburg.
Yeah, Brian. Hofburg ran a big race in the Kentucky Derby when he was very lightly raced. He came out of the Derby well. Bill Mott said, we're going to pass on the Preakness. Hofburg's up at Saratoga, where the Oklahoma training track is open, enjoying the nice cool weather up there, and is reported to be in fine fettle getting ready for the big race. And Vino Rosso is owned by Mike Rapoli, and Todd Pletcher has him. He certainly got the worst of everything. Dirt trip in the Kentucky Derby and didn't get to show the talent that you and I think he has, and will certainly be an exciting prospect in the Belmont.
Right. I agree with you on both, Matt. Most importantly, I think they're 12 furlong horses. You know, we don't know that Justify is a 12 furlong horse. I have my suspicions, and I have my suspicions still after the Preakness. Whether he was going to win the Preakness if they went a little farther or not, I just, in my heart of hearts, don't know if Justify really wants 12 furlongs, or at least wants it to the point of he's as good at 12 furlongs as he is at 9 or 10 furlongs. But I think Vino Rosso and Hofburg are horses likely really to appreciate that distance, and that could be a telling thing when they run the Belmont. Now, Matt, it'll be interesting to see the pace scenario here, because I think Justify has a much, much better shot here. Obviously, I'm not saying anything that anyone doesn't know, but if he can run a 113 early without much pressure, that changes things versus someone going out and doing 111 or something and putting a little pressure to Justify early. Pletcher works for Windstar and some of the owners of Justify. So, Vino Rosso would be a likely candidate as a Rapoli horse to have a horse in there to help soften Justify up. But there's even some politics involved, whether that's going to happen and who's going to do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting scenarios that I'm sure will come to light as we continue with these next 2 weeks. But like you said, Vino Rosso is Mike Rapoli, and Mike Rapoli is an extremely big client for Todd Pletcher. Mike Rapoli, by all means, is the kind of owner who would enter another one of his horses in the race to try and get a more favorable pace scenario for Vino Rosso. Rapoli's got tons of horses in the Pletcher barn, so it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Right,
and Vinny Viola, of course, is the other owner on Vino Rosso, and Vino Rosso, Matt, definitely a big candidate in my eyes for the Belmont Stakes. Now, let's talk about we're going to talk about the Triple Crown a lot more in the next couple editions of HorseCenter. But right now, I just want your feeling. I had a feeling right after the Preakness. It hasn't changed too much. But what's your feeling on the chances that we see our 13th Triple Crown winner and our second Triple Crown winner in 3 years, and our second Triple Crown winner for trainer Bob Baffert?
Brian, I think that it's going to be easier to do that when we know a little bit more about the field. But the one thing I'm going to say is something that, I've said a couple times already, is that in that time period between when Affirmed won and the long wait until American Pharoah won, there were a lot of very, very, very good horses that tried to win the Triple Crown and failed.
That's true. And there's good reason for it. And some horses came very close, some horses not so close. But Justify has a lot of work to do still. And my feeling right after the Preakness, and my feeling now is I think he's more likely not to win. Sorry to say, I would like to see another Triple Crown winner. Triple Crown winners are great, and this is a deserving horse. This is a very good horse. Really amazed at what he's been able to do in just 5 starts. But I think if I was a betting man, and I am, if I was a betting man, I would put my money on the against line in the Belmont Stakes, Matt. Okay, Matt, Justify won the Preakness in a sea of slop, dense fog, 2/3 of the way to the Triple Crown. But that wasn't the only thing that happened over the sloppy Pimlico racecourse over the Preakness weekend. I want to take you back to Friday because there were some interesting results. Can we start with the filly division of the Preakness, the filly version of the Preakness, I should call it, the Black-Eyed Susan? We probably didn't have the leaders of the division coming back from the Kentucky Oaks in the Black-Eyed Susan, but I think we have a very interesting winner that I was kind of high on before she had some issues down at Oaklawn Park, but I really liked what I saw from Red Ruby in the Black-Eyed Susan.
Yeah, Red Ruby, beautiful gray daughter of Tisnow, ran a really big race, got out of the gate smartly. Coach Rocks, who is trained by Dale Romans, was the pace setter, and Red Ruby stayed right close to Coach Rocks. And as they were going around the final turn and heading for home, Coach Rock started to fade a bit, and Red Ruby turned it on and opened up for a big victory of almost 5 lengths.
Right. She had been on a winning streak, Matt. She had a very good record. She had some barn accidents, some scrapes, and some cuts at Oaklawn Park. She ran a little disappointing race in her last race at Oaklawn. She was forced to miss the Kentucky Oaks. I'm kind of sorry that she wasn't in there, especially now, seeing what this daughter of Tisnow, pretty filly, by the way, pretty great filly, did on Friday in the Black Eyed Susan. And I think she's another one that we could throw into the mix, along with, of course, Monomoy Girl, the leader of the division. Wonder Godot's headed up to Canada, and Bazoo, Midnight Bazoo, I think deserves another shot. So we'll see those latter two, Monomoy Girl, Midnight Bazoo, and the Acorn on Belmont Stakes Day. Red Ruby would fit in the Acorn, so maybe the more the merrier. Caledonia Road is supposed to be headed there as well. So again, the Acorn could be one that we look forward to, but Red Ruby has moved up to be one of the top 3-year-old fillies in the country after this Black Eyed Susan. Having said that about Red Ruby, Matt, she might not have been the most impressive winner Friday at Pimlico because, of course, the historic Pimlico Special was held earlier in the day, 1 mile and 3/16, the same distance as the Preakness. And one of our old friends, the winner of the Holy Bull, the Wood Memorial, and the Belmont Stakes runner-up of 2017, Irish War Cry, son of Curlin, bred in the state of New Jersey, did his thing in the Pimlico Special.
Yeah, it was good to see Brian. Irish War Cry showed a lot of promise, if we remember, in 2017 on the Derby Trail, but had yet to find the winner's circle in well over a year. As a matter of fact, Brian, his last win had been in the Wood Memorial in April of 2017. So for me, it was really great to see Irish War Cry put all the pieces together. He clearly liked running on the sloppy Pimlico track. His dad was pretty good on the sloppy surfaces also, and he led that race wire to wire. Nobody was beating Irish War Cry on that Friday in Baltimore.
Right, Matt. The older horses, the older males at least, are leaving a little bit to be desired, I think, as far as overall quality after the retirement of the excellent runner, Gun Runner, after his big win in the Pegasus. So the older male division, West Coast is the leader, of course, but he hasn't won a race this year. He was second in the Pegasus, second in the Dubai World Cup. Is Irish War Cry the type of horse that can threaten this division? Can he win big races? Maybe at Saratoga, like the Whitney or the Woodward. Is he even a Breeders' Cup Classic possibility? I'm not sure. And there are races where he looks awfully good, and then there are some races where you just left scratching your head. Good connections, nice people, down to the trainer, Graham Motion, but he is a little bit hard to figure.
Yeah, and maybe we can chalk it up to being a 4-year-old and maturity and settling down and learning his lessons and knowing what to do on the racetrack, or maybe it was just the sloppy surface, but he's got plenty of opportunity and plenty of big races for the handicap division all over the country where he can try and get some more big wins.
So you don't think he'll be limited to New Jersey bred stakes anytime soon?
Yeah, there aren't too many of those New Jersey bred stakes left, I'm sorry to say, Brian.
That's true. All right, Matt. Folks, as you can tell, I probably don't sound like myself today, battling a head cold, but I wanted to be here for HorseCenter. The show must go on, as they say. Sorry for my sound today. But anyway, I appreciate you watching as always. I want to thank our sponsor, the best contest site out there, Derby Wars. Matt, who else do we need to thank? Brett Workman, the producer. Can we thank him?
We always want to thank Brett Workman, and we also want to remind the fans about our Derby Day Racing partnerships and our meet and greet coming up on Saturday, June 2nd on the backstretch at Churchill Downs in the barn of our trainer, Buff Bradley. If any of you out there are interested in joining us, please drop us a line. The information is on our DerbyDayRacing.com website.
right? And as always, I hope you will subscribe if you haven't already to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation. Next week, we will be talking more Triple Crown. Justify and his march towards immortality, or will he be just another horse like so many other than American Pharoah that falls just one leg short of the Triple Crown? Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.